Like most siblings, my brother Vineet and I had a complicated, sometimes love-hate relationship. But the one thing that always stayed constant in our relationship was that he always looked out for me, even when I wasn't looking out for myself. And this started even before I was born. When my mother was pregnant with me back in India, my brother would come up to her, rubbing her pregnant belly and asking, "When is Kaka coming? When is Kaka coming?" Kaka is the word in Hindi for an unborn child. And then after I was born, there are so many pictures of my brother just holding me and protecting me from anything bad that could happen to me in the world. And when I eventually became a toddler and started walking around, playing, and talking, my brother and I were inseparable. We used to play with each other on our bikes, sometimes pretending to play house. He and I would often get into burping contests, just, typical older brother, younger sister kind of things. But then a couple of things changed. The first is my brother entered puberty. And with puberty comes a change in how you view your siblings. It's no longer cool for a 13-year-old boy to hang out with his 8-year-old sister. The second thing that happened is my family moved for a lot of different reasons. We ended up moving from India to Saudi Arabia to New Zealand to eventually coming here to the United States. And the new culture started creating a rift and gap in our relationship. And my brother, who was inseparable in my life, his life now became about AP classes and debate tournaments. It was about studying to start to stay ahead of the grade and blowing off steam, not by playing with me, his little sister, but by playing video games or going online to talk to his friends on AOL Instant Messenger. And on the weekends, he was gone to debate tournaments. So I basically barely saw my brother. My brother was the one thing that I had that was constant through this entire sea of change, of moving countries, of uprooting our lives, and trying to find community in every single new place that we went to. And with all this change, my brother was no longer there for me. We stopped being friends. And I felt like an empty person. I didn't really know where I belonged or where I fit in. When I tried to connect with my classmates, they were talking about Beyonce or Lunchables. And meanwhile, I was sitting there eating the paratha that my mother had lovingly packed for me the day before. And I just didn't really know what to say to them. So my brother finished high school, eventually ended up going to college. I was seeing him a couple times a week. Now I saw him 4 weeks in a year. And I sort of became this sort of person going through the motions of life, trying to reflect what he had taught me about working hard and studying in school and focus on that. When my brother would come home, we would just fight all the time. Sometimes verbally, sometimes physically. And one of these times, my brother came into my room, clearly looking to pick a fight. I said something meaningless back to him. And then he told me, he's like, "Why don't you look people in the eye when you speak to them?" And it was the first time someone had made me realize that all of this baggage that I was carrying about not being enough, about not fitting in, but not being able to connect or relate to the people around me, about not having community, was not just impacting the things that I carried inside of me, but was impacting how other people on the outside perceived me. And it wasn't at the time that I just woke up the next day and was like, all right, I'm a new person. But it was something that I thought very consciously about as I took the next step in my life in going to college, in where I went to school, in the friends that I kept around me. And as I healed and became comfortable looking at people in the eye, I also started empathizing with my brother. I realized how difficult it must have been to make this transition on his own. His little sister, who had no idea what was going on in his life, his immigrant parents, who were just trying to make it the next day in America. And our relationship healed. My brother and I were both in San Francisco Bay Area at the time, and we started going out to monthly dinners or lunches. And through talking, we were able to heal some of the past fighting that we had done. In fact, it became enjoyable to spend time with him again. One of the things that he would do is, as soon as a waiter was out of earshot, he would start talking shit about everyone in the restaurant in Hindi. It would make me laugh, and I was starting to like my brother again. Then things changed. My brother ended up eventually moving away from San Francisco to Austin, Texas, where he got married, he has a beautiful wife, he has a kid. I decided to take a new job opportunity and move from San Francisco to New York City during March of 2020, which is the start of the COVID-19 global pandemic. That was a really great move. And through the process of moving to New York and starting this new job, all of these insecurities about myself that I thought I had conquered, about not being enough, about figuring out my community and my people, started coming back and haunting me in my life, this time in a more professional context. The job that I was in really took a lot out of me. I felt like I was giving it my all, it was taking over my life, but it wasn't making me feel valued, and I just felt sort of stuck in this place where I felt like I was giving everything that I could, but it wasn't really giving me anything back, and I just didn't know what it meant for me in my life. And I entered this intense period of burnout, anxiety, and depression that was so severe that there were days on weekends where I just wouldn't even leave my bed, and it really started impacting some of the personal relationships that I had. While I was in the thick of this burnout and depression, I ended up visiting my brother in Austin, Texas. It was sort of the first family reunion that we had had since the start of the pandemic. And while I was there, my brother would often try to talk to me about what was going on. He would say, like, what's going on, let's have a conversation. And every single time I would be like, no, let's talk about it tomorrow. Eventually, tomorrow turned into more tomorrows, turned into the day before I was supposed to fly back to New York. And then my brother was like, no, we're gonna talk about this right now. And so we talked, and I explained to him what was going on. And my brother convinced me that I should probably quit this job, that no job is worth your mental health, is not worth you feeling this way. And he helped me sort of contextualize and put a lot of things into perspective. But more than that, my brother wanted to make sure that I was feeling okay in that moment. So he ended up taking me to the arcade. And if you know me, you know I'm not an arcade person. I don't really like playing games. But I decided to do it for my brother because I was like, okay, he's like putting in all this effort, so like, let's go with it. And we ended up playing Pac-Man, which I learned that I was apparently very good at. And Deal or No Deal, where we won absolutely no deals from the bank, but that's okay. And it was almost like we were 6 years old again. And we were just sort of, on, I guess, adult-sized bikes, but not really on bikes. And sort of lost in each other's world in like a really beautiful and interesting way. And in that moment, even though my brother never said, I love you, or I care about you, or I think about you, and even though this used to drive me absolutely crazy as someone who loves words of affirmation, I've come to accept that no matter what my brother says or doesn't say, that my brother, my bhaiya, will always love his little sister, his kaka. Thank you so much.